What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Peter DeBuslo, and in today's video I'm going to give a 1-year review on the Nikon Z30. It's actually more powerful than you think. Okay, so we're going to talk about ergonomics. The camera is quite small. As you can see, we have a small record button on the top here. Now, when you do hit the record button, we have like a red tally thing around the screen to indicate us that we are recording, which is a nice little safe thing, especially if we're like vlogging or something. We know that we're recording. I feel like it could have been cool, whatever, if we had like another little record button on the bottom here, just for a little bit more like security of making sure we can hit the record button instead of going like this, record and then turn, or using like a finger on the top here or whatever, because this camera is aimed for vlogging, but it's actually more powerful than just vlogging. I shot a full wedding with just this camera itself and the Astro Hori 28mm f2 or 2.8, I think. I'll put a review for that lens up here somewhere. But yeah, this camera under $1,000 comes with a kit lens. Now that's Canadian dollars. This is a 16. This is the 16 to 50 kit lens. The cool thing about this lens is that you actually have to turn it and then you're able to start recording. So if it's actually full inside the lens, you won't be able to record or something like that. I don't know if that's like a safety thing or whatever. Kind of cool, might be a little bit different, but the lens is actually very small itself, which is why I think this is a great travel camera. Last year I brought this to Miami and you can actually record great looking images and photos. That's why I brought this onto a wedding, and I only used this camera to shoot majority of my A-roll footage for my wedding, and I'll post some of those clips up here somewhere. One thing I don't like about the camera is that we have a small micro HDMI, because those things can get a little bit flimsy. Another thing that this camera is missing is like a headphone jack. So if we do have a microphone on here, we kind of have no way of monitoring our audio. Instead, we can just look at the levels. Having that headphone jack is just an extra security for us to know what our audio is going to sound like. This camera is missing that. One thing I like about the camera is that we have the tilting screen. So if we are vlogging, we can obviously see what we are filming, especially when we hit that record button. We have like a nice red square or tally thing going around the entire screen, indicating that we are filming. So now this camera takes regular SD cards. On 128 gig memory card, we can shoot roughly 2 hours of footage. I believe this shoots in 8-bit. I'm not 100% sure, but the quality that we're getting out of this camera is pretty amazing. You know, if it wasn't amazing, I wouldn't have shot a full wedding day on just this camera itself. I do have obviously extra batteries. For my extra batteries, I'm using the Artman. Now these are pretty good, but I do have a couple Nikon batteries that are made for the Nikon Z30 as well. Another cool thing about this camera is that we can connect it through USB-C or charge it through USB-C, which is pretty cool. I think most cameras these days are going to be coming out with a USB-C input. And of course, we have our dials on the top here to shoot in manual, auto, or whatever mode you would like. And on the back here, we have our dial for the photo and video mode. Now, when I'm shooting on this camera, I just like the shutter button instead of using the record button. So you can easily adjust the record button to be used as the shutter button instead of the record, because I just feel like the record button is just a little far back instead where the shutter button is, because your hand just feels a little bit more nicer when you're holding the camera. So now one main important subject that I want to talk about this camera, because I think it's where this camera really shines and nobody really talks about, is that this camera is really, really good in low light. I was able to shoot like a 12,000 ISO and just I was able to get a super clean image. I brought this actually with me on a behind the scenes to help my buddy Frank, and I was shooting at a very high ISO and the image is actually super clean. So now one thing this camera is missing is that we aren't going to get an actual log picture profile. I just feel like that's one thing that this camera is missing. We have a whole bunch of other picture profiles, but we can download log style picture formats through some website. I'll put a link in the description below. Now, one picture profile that I love using is like this Fuji picture profile. I'll put a link over here where you can get it. Pretty much good straight out of the camera. You don't have to do much grading. But obviously, if you want to touch up the saturation, skin tones, I would recommend doing that as well. So now if you are in the Nikon ecosystem, it just makes sense to pick up another Nikon camera. Actually, I picked this camera up first before the Nikon Z8. So it kind of just made sense to buy more lenses. So now you can obviously use the Z mount style lenses on here, and you can also use Z to EF adapter, so we can seamlessly match these cameras together, which I find that very easy to match this and the Nikon Z8. Regardless if we're shooting on a log picture profile on the Z8, you can match it no problem, and it's pretty hard to kind of see what camera you are using. As I mentioned earlier in the video, that this camera is kind of aimed for vlogging. I feel like it's just a little bit more powerful than just vlogging. As I mentioned, great in low light. It's small, tiny, brought with me to Miami. It's very versatile. So if you're looking for like your next camera for traveling or even shooting higher end projects, the Nikon Z30 will just do that. It's a great camera for the price. Like I said, under $1,000. I think it's like $700 or $800 Canadian with the kit lens. You can't go wrong, and I feel like this camera is probably one of the higher end cameras right now. Well, actually, Canon just released their newer cameras that are very similar to this. They do shoot in 10-bit, so I'm not too sure, the quality in those cameras. They might be a little bit better than the Nikon Z30, but for the price, I feel like you can't go wrong. Now, I haven't really shot much photos with this camera, but I mainly use it for video. And I also don't have a cage, as you can tell, because I just wanted to keep it very small as possible. Getting a small camera, there's a reason why you're going for the smaller camera. I feel like when you use a cage, it just adds a little bit more bulk to it. So if you are traveling, my recommendation is just to like travel with just going naked with the body itself and no cage. Just it can add a little bit more bulkiness to the camera. So like most cameras, there are a recording limit on, most of these entry-level cameras. On the Nikon Z30, there is no record limit. So if you are using this camera for a wedding and you want to shoot like a ceremony or something and it's going to be 45 minutes long, you're able to run that full 45 minutes into the memory card without stopping to record at the 30-minute mark like most cameras. So now one thing that I just want to mention, that when I was using the Astrahori 28mm, I think it's an f2.8 or f2, that lens did very good for autofocus, and the kit lens does great for autofocus as well. But this camera is super great if you're looking for something that does do good autofocus. If you're shooting certain projects and you need that great autofocus, it is missing some focus features like the higher end Nikon cameras, but like I said, for under $1,000 you're going to get a great camera that can shoot majority of everything that you need to get done. If you're looking for a camera under $1,000 including a kit lens that can provide USB-C power, mic input, flip out screen, and a great 4K image, I would highly recommend taking a look at the Nikon Z30.